Hello and welcome to today's webinar, No Longer a Luxury, BPM is Imperative to Business Operations. 5 steps to learn how it can work for you. I'm Teresa Resick, Director of Webinars here at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's event. And with me today are AIIM's Chief Analyst, Bob Larrabee, and Adam Stork from MicroStrategies. And MicroStrategies is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. And before we get started, I just want to offer a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. By joining our webinars live, you can customize your own viewing experience, so feel free to open and close or resize the different windows you have on your screen. And across the bottom of your screen is a list of all the widgets that are available to you today. You can download a PDF of the presentation at any time. Just look to the resources list that's to the right of your slide area. And there's also a few other documents and links that I've put in there to help you learn more about today's topic. So feel free to click those at any time. They'll pop open in a new browser tab for you, and you can access them after the webinar as well. Feel free to ask questions throughout the hour using the Q&A feature, and we will hold these questions until the end, where we should have about 5 or 10 minutes to answer them. But you can also ask for any technical assistance or make any comments along the way, so feel free to do that as well in the Q&A with that Q&A feature. And this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIIM.org's Webinars on Demand library in just a few days. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our featured speakers today. Bob Larrabee is Vice President and Chief Analyst of Market Intelligence here at AIIM. And Bob is an expert in the application of advanced technologies and process improvement to solve business problems and enhance business operations. With over 30 years of industry experience, including product management, R&D, marketing, sales, and education, his passion is to share his knowledge and experience with organizations seeking to improve their operations, embrace technology, and drive their business forward. And we also have with us today Adam Stork, and he is Vice President of Business Solutions at MicroStrategies. And Adam has over 20 years of experience in solving business problems with enterprise content management and business process management technologies. Adam is able to architect and deliver solutions on many different document management and document capture platforms. And the key objectives for Adam are to make his clients smarter, more efficient, and more successful than before the project kicked off. I think that's a noble mission there. So right now I am going to turn things over to Bob Larrabee, and I know he's just going to mention this Industry Watch report that our presentation is going to be based on today. So Bob, do you want to chat a little bit about your research in general before you jump in here?
Hi, yes, thanks, Teresa, and welcome everybody. Welcome Adam and everybody that's joining us here today. This particular webinar is centered around or focused around our latest Industry Watch report, which is on BPM, is Process Improvement and Automation 2016. And in here we basically explored current trends and directions, challenges, issues, and so on, and the benefits related to BPM and process automation and process improvement. And so this is available to you. I know that there's a link in the resources available to you. You could download the executive summary now. And there's also the full report, which is available to our professional members with premium content, which is available on the website. This was released a few weeks ago. It is brand new. One of the first times we've ever taken a complete look at only BPM. We've talked about process and things in relation to content management and so on, but this one is dedicated solely to process improvement and automation in the BPM marketplace. And we found out some really interesting tidbits that we're going to share with you here today. So, for example, one of the items that we uncovered, or one of the bits of information that we uncovered, is we asked folks about the importance of BPM to their organizations. And one of the things that we found, several years ago, if I had asked this question, how important is BPM, or even what is BPM, to some folks, they might not have had a good answer. They might not have known what I was saying when I said BPM, or they might have looked at this and said, well, that's process, depending on who I talk to. If it was in the technology side of the house, they might respond back by saying, well, that's a process type of thing, and that really belongs in the business unit. And the business unit might look at it and say, well, that's a technology thing, and really that belongs with IT. But the reality of it is, it really is a team sport. BPM is a team effort, and we need to look at it holistically. So look at the organization as a whole. It's not just IT or the business unit. It's both combined. There's governance that we need to deal with and so on related to this. And so now what we're seeing as a result of these, the information that we gathered is that 55%, the majority of folks, when we asked that question about the importance, 38% of the 55% that said it's important said that this is significant or it's imperative. So they're coming to the realization that process is really integral part of business operations. But the other thing that we're finding is that it's not just about the process, it's also about the content that's related to the process. So how do things interact, interrelate, the human-to-human, the system-to-system content, and all of those pieces put together. So no longer siloed, if you will. Companies are looking at this holistically and saying, yeah, this is extremely important for us, and we need to get a grip around this. Now, Adam, I know you get a lot of exposure to this as well, and I'm kind of curious, what is MicroStrategy seeing these days in relation to this?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I mean, it's really intriguing because, we've been doing this for a long time, and the last few years, the conversation is really much more focused around the business process. The days of just, let's talk about the documents and where the documents go, not as much. It's more about talking about the business process. What's that business outcome that they're trying to drive? Don't get me wrong, the documents, still relevant, but not the driver. It's really the business process. And it's not just, the business process. It's the ability to handle the change in that business process. All right? So if you look at it, yes, everybody wants to do that automation. They want the business process to change initially, but then they know that they're going to have to continue to update that process. And what's intriguing is it seems nowadays there's a lot more of that conversation. There's a lot more, comfort level about, okay, it's time. Let's not only handle this change, but let's keep in mind that we're going to continue to change in business. So it's really interesting to see how that, priority from let's focus on documents to let's focus on the process and dealing with that process has come about.
And that's really important. The other thing too is that, and a lot of times I've heard this from folks, is there's a discussion about BPM and workflow and what's the difference with that. And one of the things that I have the good fortune of doing with AIIM is to help develop the training curriculum, but also deliver it. And one of the things that we've pointed out in those training classes, and it still resonates to the user community today, is workflow typically deals with the human element, human-to-human interaction. So moving information through a process, so to speak, and automating the steps in a process, where BPM is all-encompassing of that, but also includes things like back-end systems integration. It really becomes kind of the middle layer between the line of business systems, the repositories and all that, the information, if you will, and the human element, bringing it all to center. And one of the biggest challenges that we've seen as a result of some of the survey that we had done, the biggest operational problem, and this is what you were saying before, is what is the outcome, focusing on the outcome, focusing on the process. One of the biggest challenges that a lot of businesses have or organizations have is something gets stuck in the process. So 58% of the folks that we talked to said this, that their biggest operational problem is something gets stuck or jammed up in the process. And for 46%, they're dealing with compliance errors in relation to process. And really, they kind of go hand in hand, although they're not mutually exclusive. But if you're dealing with a compliance audit or a compliance request, something gets hung up in the process along the way, of course, now you're not going to be able to deliver this in a timely fashion, and it could result in all kinds of negative impact there. So stuck in process, of course, being the biggest operational thing, but compliance as well. And so these are things that folks are focusing on in relation to process improvement and automation as well. So giving that context, how do you see this, Adam?
Yeah, I think the stuck-in process is definitely a big topic. I mean, we find that people end up spending a lot of time worrying about the process that they're trying, the overall process, than doing the actual work that needs to get done. Right? So you talk about people dealing with stuck-in process. You talk about the idea that says, I need to get this particular task finished, all right? And they focus a lot on managing that overall process and not doing that given task, right? And depending on how they're going about that, dealing with the process, people who don't necessarily understand what's going on, being able to see that bigger picture of the process, knowing what happened before, what's happening afterwards, can sometimes also cause delays, in finishing that task, right? And if you look at, business process, some people don't necessarily know what's next, in their process. And then how does that affect them? How do I get my thing done sometimes if I need to know what's next in order to continue on, all right? And what's nice about, the approach of really doing BPM and focusing on it, it's the users don't necessarily need to focus on, worrying about what's next, what's before. They can see that. By virtue of having a BPM solution, they're able to quickly see where this thing came from, where it's going, and focus on simply doing the task, at hand. And it's kind of interesting because, we have found that the more people can focus on doing what they need to do and the less time worrying about the process, the better off they are.
Well, and that's an interesting point, too, because a lot of times when I talk to folks, they don't necessarily understand what the process is. They understand what their activity is. And there's a little bit of a difference there. It's like I perform this function, but if I don't understand everything that's around this, then it could have some interesting impact to it. One of the things that we also, or that I've seen, is understanding the holistic end-to-end process. So if we make a change, for example, in a process within a department, how does that affect everybody that interacts with that department? Review and approval cycles are a prime example of this. And exactly what you were saying, if something's waiting for me, I then become either a bottleneck or a plug, if you will, the thing that causes the stuck-in process. So 1/3 of the organizations that we spoke with and talked to, and by the way, this survey was a global survey. It's not just restricted to a region. This is worldwide response that we have here. And the full breadth of the AIIM community. And so 1/3 of the organizations that we talked to said, as a benefit of BPM, they've actually been able to see a decrease in their review and approval cycle. So the stuck-in process has kind of gone away, if you will. 62% said they gained better benefits from better routing to and between individuals. So this gets back to that human-to-human kind of workflow type of element that says, you and I are reviewing something, maybe it's expense reports, which I need to fill out after we finish this call. But the whole idea that there's this review and approval process, right, and getting it from one individual to the next. 42% said they actually got greater benefit from increased organizational agility and routing between processes. So this isn't just a matter of passing from one person to another. It gets back to the premise that the end of one process is the trigger or the beginning of the next process. And so the handoffs, sometimes this is where the stuck-in process comes in, is that the handoffs or the transition from one process to the next is not as clean or as smooth as it should be. I had one person tell me that the way they felt about their process transitions was it's like throwing it over the wall and hoping that somebody on the other side catches it and does something to it. And if they don't, you really don't have any insight into that. And so this is huge, to see these types of things, that these benefits are gained as a result of better communication and better interaction, not just between individuals, but also from process to process. And so I'm sure that you've seen some of this as well in the interactions that you have with your client base and the folks that you deal with.
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting because all of a sudden, hey, surprise, meeting SLAs is something that you can do all the time, because when people are able to focus more on what they need to do, right? The given task at hand, as you said earlier, right? The given task at hand, and less worrying about managing the entire process. Surprising enough, quality all of a sudden shows up. Because let's be realistic. Everybody's got a finite amount of time, okay? And everybody's got to get what they can get done in the time that's allowed. And the less time they spend worrying about managing the overall process, the more time they conceivably have, and we've seen it, to do what it is they need to do. To focus in on that task, that activity that they have, as opposed to worrying about, okay, after I do this, where do I got to send this, or what's coming down the pipe, or, they're able to focus on it. And what was intriguing to us, and I got to tell you, it wasn't necessarily something we were planning on seeing, it was an increase in quality. The work that was being done actually became more efficient because people were able to focus more on doing the things they need to do because they weren't worried about, all the other, I don't want to say extraneous, but basically, managing the process, not to belabor a point, but the ability to focus on what they needed to do, the benefits other than getting done, what they needed to get done. You saw an increase in quality, okay, and you saw, which was really interesting, is, it gave people a comfort level to look at other business processes, because we all know, people and change, not exactly the biggest thing, and what was nice is as people saw that the increase in quality, the idea of SLAs are not a crazy thing to hit, now all of a sudden like, maybe we should look at this process or look at that process and see, what else, we could do. Nobody was injured on the play, so let's continue to move forward. Right. So, well, it's even that comfort level.
And that brings about a good point, too, because, one of the things here that you brought up, productivity increases are driving the review of other processes. I mean, basically what it comes down to is success drives success or breeds success. And so you're right. And when you've got the successful environment that you've developed and you're improving quality, you're improving customer service, response times, agility, flexibility, whatever, and whatever the SLA is that you're trying to meet, when other members of the organization see this, they want it. I mean, it's make my life as easy as you made their life.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all know that it's not that simple. It's not. There's a lot to it. But basically, from the user perspective, the person sitting in the trenches is like, "Hey, do for me what you did for them," because this is great. And the other part of this now too that I see in relation to extending beyond the corporate walls, if you will. And really I've talked to some folks that say, well, there is no such thing as corporate wall anymore, the physical brick and mortar type of thing. And that might be true. There are some government agencies that I would say would debate that. But the whole idea of leveraging now cloud and mobile in relation to extending your processes beyond the corporate walls and the corporate environment. And so, when we look at cloud service and mobile device use, and these are becoming key functionalities, and 40% of the folks that we talk to, especially in relation to extending process capabilities or interaction capabilities, collaboration, said that this is very key, the use of cloud and mobile device services. And mobile and cloud support are seen as very important for 67% of folks, because you've now got the mobile workforce, you've got employees that are no longer tied to a building. It's 7/24, 24/7 access, and quite frankly, it's anywhere on the planet or above the planet. I mean, I do travel quite a bit, and today, you can be on a plane 35,000 feet up in the air. You're flying above the clouds, and you can be in the cloud interacting with your peers, with your customers, and with your partners. And so this is really important, especially from a process standpoint that says, how do we now extend our process capabilities, our collaborative capabilities, and so on, beyond those corporate walls using these type of technologies? And so I'm sure this comes up in your discussions as well. As far as can I use mobile devices, or how do I use them, and what's the best approach for cloud, and so on. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No.
Go ahead.
No, it's interesting. You're right. I mean, I apologize. I get excited about this stuff because the cloud thing's always intriguing to me because, I remember the big deal way back when was just accessing documents, right? It was like, ooh, I can get access to my repository from my smartphone, Now it's so far beyond that. It's like, we've got clients, some financial clients, where they're approving large deals from their smartphones. I mean, these guys are sitting on their smartphones, any smartphone, but they're sitting on their smartphones and they're actually, reading PDF documents and going through stuff and, literally doing, workflow approvals and kicking off business processes. I've got an investment house that literally will kick off an entire deal process from their smartphone. From his smartphone, he'll jot down a few notes, and right from there, literally kick off an entire deal team, doing due diligence work and all this other stuff, and getting back and forth. I mean, the whole process, and it's really wild. I've even got, not a lot, but I got to tell you, I've actually got people who are writing documents on their smartphone. I will tell you, my fat thumbs aren't that great at it, but it is kind of intriguing. But I've got clients that not only are approving deals and going back and forth with stuff and reading this stuff, but actually writing documents on these smartphones. I mean, if I look back a couple of years ago, it was all about people dealing with an iPad, right? An iPad was the way they were going to do it. That bigger form factor. I don't know what it is. Maybe people's eyes have gotten better or the fonts have gotten bigger, but we've got clients that are sitting there with their iPhones and their Androids, their Galaxies, and they're writing. They're writing, they're reviewing, they're going through stuff. And as you said, I got a lot of traveling people, and the days of simply just using the phone to get, documents, it's part of the process. It's integral to the way they work. They want to know that whether they're sitting in front of their desk or they're running to catch a plane, standing in security or whatever, that they are integral to the process. They want to know that they can see what's going on. They want to know where that process is for a project or deal they're working on. They want to be able to contribute to that process. They want to be knee-deep in it, and they don't want to be tied to, a laptop to do that. It's pretty impressive to me that the group that was, thrilled to look up a document on an iPad and kind of curious is now sitting there, on their smartphone, literally knee-deep in the entire thing. I mean, and it's a form factor that I will tell you, a little curious about myself, how people will get to using that iPhone or the Galaxy to be a part of that process. But now they're doing it all right from that phone, and they expect it. They expect that process to be, on that phone the same as if they're sitting at their desk.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing, it's that expectation. The expectation that if I can do this with these social media type of things and in my private life, then why can't I do this in my business life? Why can't it be the same type of approach that we take? And using my smartphone, as you say, the number of people that are, I quite frankly, my fingers are too big to be able to type too quick on my smartphone. But you're right, I see it all the time. In fact, I see some people that are using the voice recognition capabilities to actually do that, dictate and then do speech-to-text type of conversions. And so it really is fascinating the place where technology is taking us. And one of the things that I'm always asked when I do lectures or classes and so on, who's actually driving this? What is the approach for this? How would I go about moving my organization forward? And when we asked that question in this survey, 32% said that really their BPM projects are being driven at the departmental level, and 31% are saying it's actually from the top down, which is kind of interesting because top down typically is there's some kind of a change that's needed, and sometimes I'll hear top-down in relation to things like business process reengineering, or there's a shift in the business or shift in regulatory or compliance guidelines. Usually that's where the top-down comes from, and the 32% that said projects are driven departmentally. This gets back to what we were talking about a little while ago in the idea that we're trying to improve the quality, we're trying to improve the service levels that we can drive, and departmentally, it's the department heads, the business leaders that are doing that. Now, top down, if you look at it from the C-level top down, they have come to realize the importance of this, and so line of management or I should say line of business managers, we're seeing that they're actually going through the evaluation process. What they're doing is they're saying, as a business unit, this is something that I need. This is what we need to get the job done. So looking at the outcome and evaluating what makes the most sense for the department. But the actual decision is being made for the most part by the CIO or the COO of the organization. And so this is really kind of an interesting thing where it gets back to the idea of team, where it's not the C-level making all the decisions, it's the business unit, the business managers that are going out there and saying, this makes the most sense for my organization to meet my goals and to eliminate the day-to-day pain of achieving those goals, and presenting it to the C-level and saying, hopefully this makes sense. I proved my business case, and you guys, will let us go ahead and do this. It's kind of like I've always said, if you know the vision of the company, you know the goals of the department and the pain that the workers go through every day, fix the pain, support the goals, aligned to that vision. That's basically what we're seeing here at the departmental level. And so, what are you seeing? Are you seeing that type of approach? Is the companies that you're dealing with, are they kind of going in this same direction?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's definitely a lot more conversations that are wrapped around the business. So the business teams, the LOB managers, as you were saying, definitely a lot more involved. IT is still very much involved. Don't make no mistake. IT is involved. They're the gatekeepers, and it's critical that they understand the technology to make sure it fits into the organization. All right. So IT is still involved from that perspective, but we find it takes less to get the business involved. Whereas before you felt like a dentist pulling teeth, right? Now because you're dealing with a business process, there's a lot more comfort level. There's a lot more, getting them involved is not as tough, right? And some of the executives, it's funny. I did a piece at an investment investment bank recently, and what was intriguing is we did a little bit of a BPM piece where we were able to quickly draw out, if you will, a business process. All right, and we drew it out with a BPM tool, had the whole thing drawn out. It was all good to go, and the CIO kind of waltzed in just to check on what the heck was going on, which is always a good sign. And he says, "What is that?" I said, "Well, that's your business process." He said, "Huh?" And he goes and gets the business users, and impromptu is a whole discussion about how the business process should work. You know what I'm saying? Because it was the first time the business got to see that unfold as opposed to an acute Visio diagram, because they were able to approve and reject and see that. So the BPM piece gives them also a live feeling of what it looks like. So, the execs, they're involved. They're also not just asking for the status reports. They really want to know what the heck is going on. And the businesses are less afraid. They're less afraid of getting involved. I don't want to say they're not afraid. I'm saying less afraid. There's all that stuff of reality, I don't want to make it sound like it's a utopia here, guys. I'm just, I've been doing this for a whole lot of years, so I sit in front of a lot of clients. But I will say, when they see their processes unfold and not in, say, just a Visio diagram, right? When they can see that process unfold and then change it right there. Change this approval thing or augment that and see it change. It gives them more of a comfort level about what's going on, and it also gets more people engaged. It was really wild because the meeting I'm referring to was supposed to be a basic demo of a BPM tool to some business liaisons. When all of a sudden they saw this thing unfold so quickly, it was like, whoa, let's get some users in here. And it became a whole, conversation, with the users. And again, an impromptu, sort of requirements piece. Because again, with the right tools on the BPM side, you're able to see that business process unfold, and not just in a diagram. And it makes people think a little more. It gets them thinking a little bit more about the process, thinking about what they do. And of course, as I said earlier, the executives then get excited because they're seeing the change, and it really does, as you said, Bob, earlier, success breeds success. When they see that stuff start to happen, people get engaged, and now I've got a business group, if you will, that's like, I'm not a dental assistant trying to pull teeth. I'm actually part of, literally making their work better, and it's quite frankly kind of cool. So, it's definitely more businesses involved. executives giving a darn, really want to be more than just knowing a status report, but want to be involved in the stuff. And as a business sees success, they want to be a part of it. I mean, that really is the reality.
Yep. And you bring up a good point here, because one of the things that, and actually I'm going to go back to that slide for a moment.
Sure.
One of the things that you brought up here was, and in your bullet point, is IT is more a gatekeeper versus the driver. But you hit on something that's extremely important, and that's the fact that it really isn't all about technology, because the message that you're giving here is business teams working together, the idea that they're looking at the process, the idea that they're bringing everything together, they're looking at the process maps or developing them if they don't have one. And really, that's one of the things that came out in our study as well, is that the majority of folks, when we asked them for their perceptions of BPM, the majority of them, 97%, said they see this as a systematic approach. It's a combination of what you described there, which is, let's get around the table, let's talk about the way things are running, and then we look about the technology. So it's a combination of these things. The other thing that I see and have seen here, you're right about business teams not as afraid of change as maybe they once were. It's all about change management too. And I think one of the things that's really important, the way that you hit on this, is by bringing all these parties to the table, it makes change a little bit more palatable. I guess that's not really the right word, but it makes people feel engaged, right? When you engage somebody in a project like this, then what it does is it makes them feel a greater part of it. And one of the things that I've seen in the past, something that really doesn't work well, is when a company makes a decision to go out and do something like this and implement technology, then basically throw it at the user community, it will fail.
Oh my!
It will fail.
It's funny you should say that. It's funny you say because we've seen that piece, like you're saying, where if the users don't feel ownership, like, and everybody listening to this knows this, right? If the users don't feel a sense of ownership, it's not going to happen. We've got a lot of, we do a lot of state and local governments that have a lot of process, a lot of critical processes, and they're trying to do stuff for their community a lot of times. Their users are citizens, and there are a lot of business processes wrapped around that, and those guys are trying to make a difference for the people, for you and I, quite frankly, Bob, and the ability to get those people who are building these processes to have that comfort level of ownership, right? To have that comfort level that says, I can be a part of this. I'm going to drive this because I deal with these people all day long. Let me put that process together. And as life changes, as we talked about, right? As life changes and evolves, the ability to then change what I changed a little while ago, always a critical thing. So, it's nice to see that the business people who live with this day to day, the processes, right, the actual work, can be more of a part of it, want to be a part of it, and they're able to, for their constituents, for their users, make that difference.
Yep, and some of the tools, I look at this as technology as a tool, right? But some of the tools that you have to take into consider for a BPM environment, things like governance, governance over process, governance over business operations, governance over project by itself.
Oh,
But then you have things like, the process mapping. Process maps, I think, is a very important thing, which we've been talking about here and in general across the board. One of the things that I've come to realize really early on in my career is that most business processes were initiated out of serendipitous need. Something had to happen, somebody made it happen, and everybody looked at it and said, yeah, this worked, let's keep doing it this way. And in fact, they're not really designing a process. And so, when we talk about things like process design, mapping tools, designing tools, things along those lines, and then depending on the situation, is it workflow, is it routing, is it full BPM capability? What is it that you actually need in relation to that? Do you find that people get confused about the different types of technologies and tools available?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because, they know they have a problem, right? They know that a business process problem, and the problem is people will only attack it with what they know. And some people, like you said, will grab Visio and start making all sorts of cute diagrams, right? And other people will go off and spend entirely too much money on this incredibly expensive solution, and they bought it because it was incredibly expensive and does 400% of what they need, because at the end of the day they're trying to solve this business process, and there's always this confusion about what do I need, to do, and a lot of times that's sort of the opening lines for us, is trying to help them, the education part, like what your paper does, educate people on what it means to do things. I got to jump on one of the pieces you said that I didn't want to let slip real quick, is your governance piece. And it was funny because I know, we've talked about it, Bob, in the past, but one of the great things I've found, with some of these BPM tools is that by virtue of having the rules in the business process, by virtue of having the templates of how things work, you basically instill governance in that process,
Yes.
And I think that's something that people don't necessarily always jump to the reason for doing BPM, because they want to automate, make life easier, but it also allows you to put some walls and some barriers in a good sense from a governance perspective, making sure who is doing what happens next, did this checkpoint happen, let me see who did that checkpoint, you know what I'm saying? And I think that's one of the things that's been interesting for us is in some of the more regulatory focused areas is, Adam, we all know what we need to do, but we need to make sure that people who are not completely familiar stay in that same track.
Yes.
And the BPM tools allow you to put some governance around there. There's always going to be a little bit of free form in certain, aspects of it, but the key is to also help people. Like I said, way back when, you want to give them a path to go, but I think these tools are also helpful in handling that governance stuff, guiding them on what they need to do next and where to stay in the lines, if you will. And that's a big deal, especially in some of the regulatory worlds we live with. It's definitely in the regulatory world.
And monitoring becomes critical for that too, is to keep an eye on what's going on. You mentioned before running reports, or even it's not just looking for or at status reports, but it's the ability to monitor what's going on and then take that data and utilize it in a way that's most beneficial for the department, for the organization as a whole. One example that I have is 4 people working together as a group, 3 of them processing 50 units, say, per hour, and one that's processing only 2. And if you looked at the raw data, you would think that the person processing 2, that person is lazy or just doesn't want to work, and you should replace them. But the reality is, if you look deeper into what the cause is, the 3 that are processing at that high level are passing all the exceptions off to the 1. And so it's important to have that insight into the business, right? And that poor one guy, if they went just by the numbers, he'd be out of a job.
I've never heard that before. No, not at all. No. Well, it's funny because the other piece, staying with that, really quick, is one of the big things, obviously, when it comes to this process work, is the inevitable dashboard, right? There's the inevitable dashboard at the end of stuff. And one of my clients was funny. We built a dashboard for a process, and we had an icon at the end. So they look at this dashboard and say, how old is something, days outstanding, and where the current task is, normal stuff. And the icon at the end, there's 3 icons. The icon at the end allows you to send an email to the person with the current task to have them do the work. Well, this company in the UK we worked with, they call that the inspirational icon. They said, yes, Adam, that's the icon we click. We want to inspire somebody to do their job, and that was the big piece, because it's like, now we've got this whole process set. Now we know where things are. Now the next level is, if somebody's got it, how do I get them to do their thing? So they look at this dashboard. They see, poor Adam's got sitting on this for too long. They hit what they now call the inspirational icon, and up pops an email where they send it right off to Adam and say, okay, get your butt moving, guy. You know what I'm saying? So, it's that reports, dashboard, and now they call the inspirational icon. So it's that next level of accountability, as you go through the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that term, inspirational.
I can't take credit, not mine.
So that kind of leads us into the kind of wrapping up. This has been a great conversation with you, Adam. It really is. And you've seen a lot going on. And, some of the things that I like to do, and one of the things that I'll bring us to at this point, is really some recommendations for folks. Everybody that's been kind enough to listen to us for the last 40 minutes, 45 minutes or so, and picked up some of these nuggets from us. What can they do? What are some of the first steps? Well, one of the things that I think is the top is to identify and document vital business processes. And when I say document, in a lot of cases, organizations that I've talked with, there really is no documented or process map, let's say, for the business processes. People know it, and it's kind of like handed down from generation to generation. When you ask some folks, what is the process? What is your process here? They might say, I really don't know. And you ask them what you do, and they'll tell you what they do. And then you say, well, how did you learn it? Well, I learned this from Jim. Jim retired like 3 years ago. Well, where did Jim learn it? Well, his predecessor was, so it's kind of handed down, is really not documented. So identify and document the vital business processes. And then look for for problem areas and opportunities within those processes. So, are you seeing things that are stuck in process? Is there a bottleneck, for example, and is this an opportunity to do parallel processing and to streamline or even automate, wherever you possibly can? But look for those problem areas. Is something getting stuck in process? Look for redundancy, too. There's a lot of times in a business process where there's steps in a process that are very unnecessary. There's redundant steps. Checkers, checking, checkers, checking, checkers, if you will. The worst example that I ever witnessed was 27 steps to a review and approval process that really only needed 6. But when you looked at all the things that were happening, it was based on exceptions. There was an exception, this person got involved and stayed there. And the thing just grew over time. And when you'd ask people, so, what exactly do you do when you get this? Well, if Joe signed it, then I sign it and I pass it to Jane. And then you ask Jane, well, if Philip signed it, and it's just right. For stamping, there's no value to the step in the process. So we see a lot of that. And then thinking about extending beyond the corporate walls, beyond the enterprise walls, looking at cloud and mobile, right? And how would that fit as part of an overarching solution to extend the information and process infrastructure, ecosystem, if you will? That because of the way that the world is now and the capabilities of technology, I mean, like you were saying earlier, people are writing documents on their smartphones. How do we then take and incorporate that as part of our overall strategy? And then, of course, working as a team to make it all happen. It's a team sport. It's not IT by itself. It's not the business unit by itself. It's everybody coming together with a purpose. And that's the key word there, with a purpose, a focus. And typically it's on the outcome. What is the desired outcome of this process, if you will? And what can we do to make it better, faster, stronger, more efficient, however you want to look at it? So these are some of the things that I see as kind of the first steps, and vital steps in moving an organization forward in relation to process improvement, automation, the use of BPM tools, and so on. So having said that, and I know that was a mouthful, how do you play into this?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Bob. And, I appreciate everybody sticking around for the inevitable vendor slide. I very much appreciate you guys, sticking around. Hopefully this was fruitful for the attendees. From MicroStrategy's perspective, we really are focused on solving the business problems. People ask us, where do we come into play? We come in play on the business side and helping them leverage technologies because we get involved a lot of different ways, right? We're a part of it around for a while. Micro's been around for, quite frankly, over 30 years, okay? And I'll tell you, we get involved where people say, I have a problem, come fix it. I've got a problem that with my existing BPM or my existing, ECM or what have you. And it's really a matter of looking at the business problem and best leveraging, the technology. We've got some very seasoned guys, such as myself. Polite way of saying it is seasoned, okay? And we're big believers. You like that, Bob? I got to be nice about that. So because a couple of my guys don't you say anything but seasoned, Adam. I'm like, all right, because some of my guys I've been with for 17 years. I got to be careful how I say this. But and educating our clients is a big deal. It's a serious thing. The smarter the clients are, quite frankly, the better off we are. You know what I'm saying? We're big believers in doing the education. We're big believers in helping them understand what it is we're doing. Because the smarter they are, the better off we are. And we're hoping to be a long-term partner. We want to be that trusted advisor, at the end of the day. We have to earn your respect every day. When we get involved in projects, if you're not seeing the value, that's not happening, you're not going to call us. And I'm very excited to say that we've had clients for a lot of years, and, they come and go in the sense that we do some projects. They go away for a year or so. They call us up, hey, Adam, I'm thinking about this. What are your thoughts? And we have those kinds of conversations as well. But it's really a matter of trying to solve the business problems, educating the clients so they know what's going on, and being that long-term partner for them. The trusted advisor, if you will, at the end of the day. And quite frankly, if you're not sick of hearing my voice and talking to me, I've included here my email address and phone. All right, and in the resources section, you could learn about MicroStrategies. We're big believers in solution videos, right? A lot of people call us the Warner Brothers of ECM and BPM. On our website, we've got over 40, anywhere from 2 minutes to 9 minutes, solution videos. You can see BPM in action, ECM, all that kind of fun stuff. You're not always stuck with my voice. There's some much smarter guys that do some deep dive tech stuff. But you're welcome to hit our site and learn a little bit more. I've got clients that use some of our videos to test the vendors, which is kind of funny. So feel free, while we'd love, of course, to do business with all you guys on the phone, feel free to hit the website just to learn. Take a look at different things, see some videos, get your gears turning. Get your gears like, oh, I can do this, so wonderful that. So feel free to use the website to just get smarter about everything, So I appreciate your time. I'm going to turn it back over to Teresa to handle the exciting questions.
Thank you. And we have been listening to Bob Larrabee of AIIM and Adam Storch of MicroStrategies. And just wanted to reference real quickly here, I did put links in the resource links list section there for those solution videos and that document capture and processing chart that he has there. I just thought it was excellent, so I added it in there so you could click on it right now. It's a really fascinating diagram in there. I highly encourage you to go ahead and click on that. And then also in there I have the link to download the executive summary. That's also in the resources list. And then also to the last link in there for what's next. Something happened. I intended to put this URL in there, AIIM.org/BPM Training. And Bob, before we get to a couple of the other questions, do you want to talk real briefly about this BPM training? Because I know you've actually taught this class before.
Yeah, actually, I was doing it last week in Trinidad. And the BPM training, basically, we look at the why, what, and how of BPM. So why is it important? Why would it be important to a company? What is it? How do you define it? And a lot of the things that we were talking about today with Adam, and then how do you actually implement? So mapping, designing, automating processes, governance, the strategies, all those things that go along with it. Pretty intense. There's different levels. You can do it online. You can do it in the classroom. But really the whole focus is to give you that, from a business perspective, the foundational elements that you need to deal with BPM projects and process improvement.
Thanks, Bob.
So thanks
and
for
then
the
to find all of
opportunity.
these. Yeah, and the links to all of these things that I just rattled off there, to the right of the slide area is the resource list box, and that's where all of these links are over there for you guys to access right now, so feel free to click on those. We have so many questions that have come in here, and I'm going to do my best to hit as many of those as we can in the time we have left. Bob, a couple of people asked about the demographics of this process improvement survey you took. I know the full results are in that full report. Can you just touch real briefly on the breadth and scope of the people who answered and participated in this survey?
Yeah, it was a global survey that we conducted. among the AIM community. So it went out to all different geographies. I would say probably, I'm going to ballpark it, about 50% was from North America, probably another 25% or so from Europe, EMEA, and the rest from the rest of the world. And the breakdown of folks that responded, it was pretty well balanced across IT, information professionals, and the business folks, so department heads, that type of thing. We actually had a few folks in there that referred to themselves as the Chief Process Officer, which is kind of a new position that we're starting to see under the Chief Operating Officer, so Chief Process Officer, which is an indication that a lot of companies, there gets back to what I was saying, is they're finding that this is an imperative or significant for their business operations.
Adam, someone had asked a question about case studies where they can read about how other people have done this, and I know I spotted some nice resources on your website. Can you talk a little bit about that library of yours?
Yeah, so on our website there are various case studies on work we've done. Some names are some names have been hidden to protect the innocent. I love my investment banking clients. But there's definitely on our website some case studies. Some of the videos are actually of solutions we've done. So there's a lot of different tools on there for people to like I said, get a flavor for how we've done it, how people have done it, and really to get your gears turning. I mean, that's the key thing. The smarter you guys are, listening in on this about what you can do with BPM, where you can take it, the better off you are. We always find that it's, when you do, sessions, workshops, and so forth, people need to understand what it is possible, to really get them to think out of the box. So, hitting our website, seeing some of the case studies, reviewing some of the videos really will make you guys, smarter about what you can do, and that's critical. The smarter you guys make yourselves, when you start these projects off, definitely the better off you are. Definitely the better off.
Bob, getting a little bit of the weeds here with some technical questions. How does BPM relate to workflows? Is one a subset of the other? Can you clarify some definitions for us?
Well, earlier on I alluded to looking at it from a business point of view. There are a couple different types of process that we look at. There's basic routing, which is point A to point B, linear in nature, right? And so this might be I scan something in and I direct it to an individual, so point A to point B. Then workflow, historically or traditionally, workflow is seen as a human-to-human element. So it's basically automating the steps. You use workflow software to do this, but automating the steps in a process, the interactions between people. Okay, so think of it, the way I usually like to explain this is, think of it in terms of follow a piece of paper or information through the process. Whose hands does it touch? And we automate that, right? So the idea of the workflow, how things move through the organization. BPM takes it to a different level in the sense that with BPM, I can not only do that, automate the steps in the process and tighten those interactions between the humans, but a lot of the BPM technologies today have the capability to do some back-end integration. So I can actually do back-end systems linkage, if you will, so that I can bring the humans and information together. I can do automated decision-making processes if you're using rules engines on the higher end, that I can completely automate the interactions between systems. So say the finance system, the procurement system, and logistics. And so all of these things can be accomplished. The key here is to understand what the business problem is. What's the underlying business problem? What are you trying to solve? And what are the right technologies in relation to that? Okay. So, and actually, Adam, I'm sure you have some really good insights in this as well.
Yeah, and I think going through the technologies becomes a bigger piece. I was actually looking at one of the questions, if I may. I know we're coming up on time. I saw a question that I've seen way too many times, and it's like the question is basically, hey, how do I get started? You know, what do I do? Do I analyze every process in the company before we get started? You know, what defines an important process? And when I was reading that question, I had flashbacks of other clients who I've seen sort of spin in that area. You know what I'm saying? And you know, what I would say to that, you know, to them, you know, when it comes to attacking these pieces, you know, you want to make sure that when you don't necessarily need to define all of the processes for your organization, right? Because if you do that, you'll be doing that for the rest of your life. So what I would say is, you know, a couple of key criteria. You want to try to get processes that are self-contained, right? Because, you know, if you choose one process and that affects another process and another process, you can't cut those off. So as you look at the processes, you want to see what's self-contained. What can you put a box around? And by accomplishing that process and the users of, you know, the touch points, you know, you've got something. From a criteria on which ones to do, quite frankly, you want to try to get your engaged users. Don't necessarily try to attack, you know, the toughest one per se, right? Try to attack the one that you've got users who are bought in. Try to attack the ones where you know that you're going to get by them, because that first one you hit is going to be the sales tool for attacking everything else. And if you try to conquer the mountain, you know, in that first piece, you're not going to have that sales tool. I've got one client that literally their first one was a vacation request. Not the most vital, not the most exciting, but simple, quick, got it up, and was able to demonstrate how easy this process then went. Very simple, basic process. But it was a quick hit, quick win, and it was something that touched a lot of people. So as you guys say, you got it, exactly right. So as you look at what to hit, don't try to do everything. Don't try to necessarily grab the biggest one. When you're doing this stuff, try to grab one that can be self-contained, meaning if you do this process, you're not cutting anybody off. Get your users involved who are interested in getting involved, and do a smaller one. Get that success. Use that as your tool to get that throughout the organization, because you, quite frankly, become the salesperson at that point for your own organization, you know, and you want that success. So, you know, best advice, keep it simple, keep it small, get it done quick, and get it out there so people can see it. I don't know, Bob, what your take is. That's sort of where I'm coming from.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. It is, especially if it's your first time ever, absolutely pick something that's, you know, a bite size, if you will, like you said. Something that's small, simple, clean. Get it done, get familiar with how to go about that process, and then just run with it from there. Become the internal evangelist running around. And that's one of the keys that you said, is get recognition for that success.
Yep. No, that's it. Because like you said, I don't mean to beat the words, but success does breed success. So That's the idea. Get those ones up, running, and going. Show the value.
Well, guys, I hate to step in here and crash the party, but we're getting to the end of our webinar hour. And I want to thank, just a reminder that we are recording this webinar. It is going to be available in the next day or two back onto the AIIM website. Don't forget to download the resources list that's to the right side of the slide area. And also when the webinar is over, a brief survey is going to pop open on your desktop. I value your feedback greatly and would appreciate the few minutes it'll take for you to go through and offer your comments and suggestions and to give your feedback on today's webinar. Also want to thank our underwriter of today's webinar, MicroStrategies. Without support from the solution providers, we wouldn't be able to bring you these free educational programs like our webinar. So thank you very much for your sponsorship and support of our webinar program. As we do come to the close of this webinar here, I want to ask each of our speakers for their closing thoughts or a key takeaway. And I'd like to start first with Adam Storch of MicroStrategies and your closing thoughts today.
Well, I just want to thank AIIM for doing this, because you guys have been great in terms of just what AIIM brings to the table for us. Get the word out, get people smarter about this. This has been great for me. As always, talking to Bob, no matter how many times I talk to him, I learn a little more. As you guys listening in on this, take heed on a lot of the getting started pieces and the learning stuff, all right? Go out there, learn what you can. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. Don't be afraid to get smarter about this before you engage, and don't try to conquer the mountain right out of the gate. You know what I'm saying? So do the right thing by getting yourselves up to speed, get smarter, and pick some of those projects that'll help you make success for your organization, and use that as your launch point to make things happen.
Thanks, Adam. And Bob Larrabee of AIIM, your closing thoughts today.
Thanks, Teresa, and thanks, Adam and MicroStrategies for being a big part of this. I think basically it's don't be afraid. Don't let it make you shy away from it. Move forward. Take the steps. Taking a step forward is better than taking no steps. And one of the most important questions that you should ask as you're going through and you're looking at a process, you're looking at the activities, the number of steps. One of the most important questions, and actually one of the most annoying, is the question why. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing it here? Why are we doing it the way we're doing it? I think that's probably the best question of all. My favorite question. It was the most annoying when my kids were small, but it's my favorite question when dealing with process. Why do we do things the way we do? And what value does this have in relation to that? So don't be afraid of it. Go out there and take those first steps and get used to it. Enjoy it. It can be a lot of fun.
I agree.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. That is the end of our webinar today. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I do appreciate it. For AIIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we'll see you next time. And have a good afternoon.